Thank you for listening to Depictions Media Radio. Welcome back to Depictions Media Radio. I'm your host, Michael Clogs. First is a recorded message from Antonio Guterres, the Secretary General of the United Nations, delivering a message about Ramadan and how it should be a time of peace and a time for religious brotherhood and humanitarian efforts. So he's going to start off today's show with a message that he hopes will unite people and bring people to peace. We also have a statement from Russia from the UN Security Council, where the Russian representative from to the UN is going to speak. And here's a quote from Dmitry Polansky. In the course of special military operations in Ukraine, the Russian Ministry of Defense discovered evidence the Ukraine authorities supported and directly sponsored by the U.S. Department of Defense were implementing dangerous projects, experiments as part of a military biological program. He will continue to make accusations and say that he has direct evidence towards such a thing, that the Pentagon was actually in collusion with Kiev to develop dangerous weapons of mass destruction and mass harm using biological and chemical agents, which, according to Geneva Conventions, are prohibited and illegal weapons. And again, he goes on that Russia does have such evidence, and this is part of the reasons why they needed to stop these efforts from actually happening. We have a press update on Yemen, Ukraine, and Ethiopia from the United Nations about what is happening with humanitarian efforts and political efforts to find equality and peace in all countries, especially with some of the things that are happening in Ethiopia with famine and being able to find food for people in that region. Then we have a Ukrainian delegation as they appeared in Ottawa today about the help that they need, the military help and the help with lethal instruments to stop the Russian soldiers and the Russian government from taking over their country, and to put them back, to drive them back out of Ukraine and into Russia. They are pretty adamant about what it is that they need, and what they believe to be a timely manner in order to find these actions and the help that they need to stop the attacks from Russia from continuing. So let's listen to today's show, starting with Antonio Guterres, Secretary General of the United Nations, and we will end with the Ukrainian delegation in Ottawa talking about the military help that they need, the types of arms that they need in order to save their country.
I send my warmest wishes as millions of Muslims around the world begin the holy months of Ramadan. This is a period of compassion and empathy, a time for reflection and learning, an opportunity to come together and uplift each other. As High Commissioner for Refugees, I began a practice that I proudly pursued as Secretary General. Every Ramadan, I had the honor of visiting Muslim countries, fasting in solidarity and breaking bread with people. Unfortunately, the COVID-19 pandemic made that impossible, but I'm happy to resume this tradition this year. In these times of tragedy and suffering, my thoughts and heart are with everyone facing conflict, displacement, and fear. The Holy Quran teaches us that God created nations and tribes so that we might know one another. In these holy months and every day, let us take inspiration by working hand in hand for the safety, dignity, and prosperity of all women and men. Let us learn from each other and together build a peaceful world. Ramadan Karim.
Morning, everybody. It's the 1st of April, the International Fool's Day, but I will be speaking about serious things. As you know, in the course of special military operation in Ukraine, the Russian Ministry of Defense discovered evidence that Ukrainian authorities, supported and directly sponsored by the US Department of Defense, were implementing dangerous projects and experiments as a part of military biological program. These activities had been carried out on the Ukrainian territory in the middle of Eastern Europe and in the close proximity to Russian borders for many years, posing a real threat to biological security of our country and the region. On the initiative of the Russian Federation, the UN Security Council discussed this issue twice, on March 11th and 18th. We have circulated documented evidence received by our Ministry of Defense as official documents of the Security Council and the General Assembly. Those are Russian letters dated March 11, 18, and 29. There will be a new letter today. I recommend everyone to scrutinize these materials. Those are the copies of original documents, contracts, communications between the Ukrainian side and the Pentagon with authentic signatures, project documentation, etc. For all this time, we have been seeking clarification from the US side on the true nature of its bioactivity in Ukraine and explanations with regard to the above-mentioned documents. In particular, we asked to clarify why the US Department of State keeps insisting that the US operates no laboratories in Ukraine, while there is a documented proof of Pentagon directly managing these labs, with its subcontractors implementing projects with deadly bioagents. The key question is, why has the Pentagon been so deeply involved in biological projects on Ukraine, contracting the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense, if, as the US delegation claims, all these activities are exclusively peaceful? We have received no answer so far. The US, as well as other Western delegations, have been totally dismissive. They refuse to provide any comment of the evidence that has been revealed, labeling it as Russian disinformation. However, documents speak for themselves, and evidence received by our Ministry of Defense keeps piling up, and it is getting more and more specific. In particular, on March 31, our Ministry of Defense disclosed a list of individuals directly involved from the US side in the military biological activities on the territory of Ukraine. Let me drop you a few names as an example. Robert Pope, then director of the Joint Threat Reduction Program, who came up with the idea to establish a central depository of especially dangerous pathogens in Kiev. He had been actively engaged in the communication with the Ukrainian Health Minister, Ulyana Suprun, thanking her for the admission of the American experts to the Ukrainian labs. This fact the US side continues to deny. Joanne Wintrell, the head of the DTRA office in Kiev, that directly supervised projects to study especially dangerous pathogens, including anthrax, Congo-Crimean fever, leptospirosis, etc. Lance Lippencott, the head of the Ukrainian branch of the Black & Veatch, which is the Pentagon contractor company. Its work was brought into question even by the Ukrainian special services, which raised concerns about the threat of deterioration of the epidemic situation in Ukraine as a result of the experiments with especially dangerous infections carried out by the Black & Veatch. Others include David Mastra, who is closely associated with another Pentagon contractor, Metabiota, Mary Gattieri, vice president of Metabiota, and, as it was revealed, a confidant to Hunter Biden, which is confirmed by their correspondence. Scott Thornton, who supervised the modernization of biolabs and advised local staff as part of the DTRA projects in Ukraine. Our Ministry of Defense has also received extremely alarming evidence that the Ukrainian side attempted to get an access to technical means of delivery of bioweapons. The Ukrainian company Motor Sich requested Baykar Makina, the Turkish manufacturer of unmanned aerial vehicles Bayraktar, if it is possible to equip this UAV with systems and mechanisms for spraying aerosols with a capacity exceeding 20 liters. There is a copy of the letter. The flight range of the UAV is up to 300 kilometers. If equipped with the containers with biological substances such as UAV, such a UAV would pose a real threat of large-scale use of bioaerosols on the territory of the Russian Federation. This is a document. You will see it among the documents that we will distribute. We also have evidence that projects carried out by the Pentagon on the territory of Ukraine put health and even life of volunteers, Ukrainian citizens, at risks. The documentation for the project UP8 prescribed that the, as I quote, minor incidents with volunteers must be reported to the US Bioethics Committee 72 hours after the incident, and serious ones, including the death of the subjects, within 24 hours. End of quote. In other words, it allows for a lethal outcome through research program for this project though research program for this project officially suggested only a standard blood testing procedure. What kind of blood testing it was in reality if it could lead to the death of volunteers? We are also analyzing the evidence of the direct engagement of the US political establishment in funding of the military biological activities in Ukraine, providing funds for the Pentagon contractors Black & Veatch and Metabiota. The published communication shows that the goals were far from scientific. For example, the vice president of Metabiota, in one of her letters, I can show you a copy, noted that its activities were aimed at ensuring, I quote, cultural and economic independence of Ukraine from Russia, end of quote, which is, to say the least, quite an unusual goal for a biotech company. Military biological activities of the US on the territory of Ukraine are a violation of the Biological Weapons Convention. Such activities brings up biological threats of global scale, which respect no border and can lead up to a new pandemics, which can surpass COVID-19 pandemic. We see it as our duty to keep you updated on this file, to shed the light on those looming threats. As I said, we plan to distribute a new portion of documents obtained by Ministry of Defense as Security Council and General Assembly document. I would also like to announce that to keep you better informed, we are going to host an informal area formula meeting of the Security Council on 10 a.m. NYT time on April the 6th. To discuss a broad topic of the threats to international peace and security emanating from military biological activities in the regions across the globe. So the scope will be a little bit wider than Ukraine. This meeting will be open to media and broadcasted. It will be briefed by the prominent independent experts on bioweapons. We invite everyone to come on board and listen to the first-hand information. I promise you will get much more food for thought. I would also like to inform you that the threat of provocations with chemical weapons is still very high, and we recently distributed a new letter to the Security Council where we are drawing attention to the new information provided by the Ministry of Defense, notably that the Ukrainian nationalists continue to plot chemical provocations, and they are up to blow up railway tanks containing up to 800 tons of chlorine, which are stationed in Kochetok settlement, 15 kilometers northwest of Chuguyev city in Kharkov region. So it could lead to a very big catastrophe, contamination of up to 8 days of an area with a radius of 8 kilometers. These people intend to present this heinous act as a result of shelling of these tanks by the Russian air forces or artillery. So this is absolutely inconceivable with the tasks of our operation in Ukraine. And we would like to reiterate that the use of any chemical agents, including chlorine, against civilian population deserves condemnation in the strongest possible terms. So we are giving a heads up to the UN and hope that it will be taken into consideration. Thank you very much. Maybe one question, and I need to go to the Security Council chamber.
Ambassador, thanks for that. If you're worried about biological weapons in Ukraine, doesn't it make sense to pull back your troops and not be fighting near them? Number one. And number two, can you comment on the attack on the oil tanks in Russia? What impact is that going to have on ongoing
Okay, very
talks?
briefly. First of all, the fact that we started our military operation already led to the closure of these 20 biolaboratories, which represent a real threat to the Russian Federation. And secondly, the attacks on the Russian territory, they just reflect the real intention of the Ukrainian side and the real intention for any peace talks and gestures that could lead to certain openings. Thank you very much.
All right. Good morning and happy Friday to all of you. I want to start off with some good news for you. Hans Grunberg, the special envoy for Yemen, just announced that the parties to the conflict have responded positively to United Nations proposal for a 2-month truce, which comes into effect tomorrow, the 2nd of April at 1900 hours. The parties accepted to halt all offensive military, air, ground, and maritime operations inside Yemen and across its borders. They also agreed for fuel ships to enter into Hodeidah ports and commercial flights to operate in and out of Sana'a airport to predetermined destinations in the region. They further agreed to meet under the special envoy's auspices to open roads in Taiz and other governorates in Yemen. The truce can be renewed beyond the 2-month period with the consent of the parties. Mr. Grunberg called on the parties to fully adhere to and respect the truce and its elements, and to take all necessary steps to immediately implement it. He said that this truce is a first and long overdue step. All Yemeni women, men, and children that have suffered immensely through over 7 years of war expect nothing less than an end to this war. The parties must deliver nothing less. On Ukraine, our humanitarian colleagues tell us that more than 1.4 million people have now been reached across the country with assistance and protection services by humanitarian partners since the 24th of February. This is more than 500,000 people more than last week. We, along with our humanitarian partners, continue to scale up our response to assist people impacted by the devastation and destruction caused by the conflict, complementing the work being carried out by volunteers across the country. Our humanitarian colleagues tell us that 1.3 million people have been reached with food assistance. More than 900,000 people have received critical health care support, and more than 180,000 people have been assisted with access to clean water and hygiene products. Humanitarian partners have also reached more than 86,000 displaced people with emergency shelter or critical household items, and around 13,000 children who fled their homes and schools have received support to continue their education. However, humanitarian partners still have not been able to reach key areas where people desperately need assistance, including Mariupol, Kherson, and Chernihiv. Visiting Ukraine for the first time since the Russian military offensive, the UN High Commissioner for Refugees, Filippo Grandi, appealed in the strongest terms for an end to the war, while calling on the international community to provide sustained support to the millions of civilians impacted by the fighting. Mr. Grandi also reiterated UNHCR's commitment to stay and deliver for the people of Ukraine in neighboring countries and inside their country. With local authorities and community representatives, Mr. Grandi visited a reception center for internally displaced people that was established and run by the authorities with UNHCR support. It is one of 70 centers that have already been assessed and equipped, while others are being identified for refurbishment. UNHCR is expanding the capacity and improving the living conditions of reception centers so that they may host more internally displaced Ukrainians in need of shelter. And we have some more good news, coming from Ethiopia this morning. A convoy transporting 500 metric tons of food and nutrition supplies was moving into Tigray. This is the first time that the UN and partners have been able to move aid into Tigray by road since mid-December. Teams have also reached communities in the Afar region with desperately needed food assistance. It is critical that we now see sustained deliveries of relief supplies, fuel, and cash into Tigray, and the continued expansion of the response in conflict-affected areas in Afar and Amhara. Shortages of supplies, fuel, and cash have severely undermined the ability of humanitarian organizations to respond to the increasingly acute situation in Tigray. Some of the limited remaining food stocks were distributed in 7 towns in Tigray during the past week. Only about 1.2 million people have received food assistance in the past 5.5 months, while more than 5 million should be assisted every 6 weeks. In the absence of road convoys, except the one moving today, airlifts have allowed humanitarian organizations to transport some key items over recent months. During the past week, we were able to fly close to 40 metric tons of nutrition supplies into Mekelle. Some 360 metric tons of mostly medical and nutrition supplies have now been flown in since late January. Every bit helps, but a single convoy of 20 trucks could bring in more than twice this amount. Meanwhile, in Afar, insecurity continues to constrain access to many people displaced by recent fighting. Assistance is continuing in accessible areas, with the UN and partners providing food support to some 62,000 people during the past weeks. Since late February, close to 30% of the 630,000 people targeted have received food assistance. In Amhara, the UN and NGO partners distributed food to more than 726,000 people during the past week. And we have an update from the Democratic Republic of the Congo. Some 10,000 people have sought refuge in Uganda's Kisoro district following violent clashes that began Monday in the Ruchuru territory. The UN Refugee Agency is working alongside the government of Uganda, as well as humanitarian partners, to provide assistance to them. UNHCR says that heavy rains have made conditions even more difficult for people who arrived in Uganda with only the few belongings they could carry. The agency has already relocated some 2,350 asylum seekers to the nearby Nyakabande Transit Center. In addition to those who have crossed the Ugandan border, our humanitarian colleagues tell us that nearly 36,000 people have been displaced within the DRC. Most are being accommodated by host families or in markets and schools. The Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs says that the violence has led to the temporary suspension of some humanitarian activities in the area, affecting at least 10,000 people. UN and NGO partners are scheduled to visit the area next Tuesday to provide health assistance to civilians, medicine, and equipment to some health facilities, as well as identify other needs. As of today, some 1.88 million people are displaced within the North Kivu province, according to humanitarians. Over 2 million people in the province are severely food insecure, according to the latest food security analysis. And our peacekeeping colleagues have just informed us that the Undersecretary General for Peace Operations, Jean-Pierre Lacroix, will be traveling to Goma tomorrow, along with senior leadership from the UN mission in the country. They will attend a ceremony to honor the peacekeepers from Pakistan, the Russian Federation, and the Republic of Serbia, who died in a helicopter crash in North Kivu earlier this week. In South Sudan, members of our peacekeeping mission and partners met with the country's president, Salva Kiir, First Vice President Riek Machar, and other political leaders to appeal for calm and renewed efforts to implement the peace deal. The discussions come at a time of increasing political and security concerns, including the decision by the Sudan People's Liberation Movement in opposition to suspend its participation in peace deal mechanisms and the overall slow implementation of the agreement. The delegation, which included our mission, the African Union, the Intergovernmental Authority on Development, and the reconstituted Joint Monitoring and Evaluation Commission, said that they were encouraged that the political leaders had reaffirmed their promise not to return to war and to continue pushing the peace process forward. The delegation urged the leaders to develop a roadmap for meeting all commitments by the end of the transitional period in 11 months' time, and offered their support to this process. I want to flag that the Special Envoy for the Secretary General on Myanmar, Nolene Hazer, was in Cambodia over the past couple of days, where she met with the Cambodian Prime Minister and Chair of the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, Hun Sen, as well as the ASEAN Special Envoy, Prak Sokhonn, and other senior officials. This mission was undertaken against the backdrop of escalating violence throughout Myanmar, as bombings and other excesses committed are compounding multiple vulnerabilities facing millions of people struggling for survival. We sent full details of our meetings to you earlier today. In Kazakhstan, our team, led by resident coordinator Michaela Friberg-Story, continues to support the pandemic response. To address the impacts of COVID-19 on education, our team has provided 20,000 children in rural schools with broadband internet access, targeted over 3 million people through campaigns to prevent violence against children, and opened centers for women's entrepreneurship. Our team also distributed nearly 3 million personal protective equipment items and 21,000 pieces of equipment to fight the pandemic. It also set up a national website on vaccine information. For a greener recovery, the team enabled funding schemes for solar power stations, as well as the first green bonds in Kazakhstan, while more than 150 entrepreneurs received microcredits to start their own businesses. In a video message today, the Secretary General sends his warmest wishes as millions of Muslims around the world begin the holy month of Ramadan. He noted that when he was High Commissioner for Refugees, he began a practice that he proudly pursued as Secretary General, in which every Ramadan he would visit Muslim countries, fasting in solidarity and breaking bread with people. Unfortunately, the COVID-19 pandemic made that impossible, but the Secretary General said he is happy to resume this tradition this year. We'll have more to announce on that later on. He added that in these times of tragedy and suffering, his thoughts and heart are with everyone facing conflict, displacement, and fear. Today is World Autism Awareness Day. In a message for the day, the Secretary General notes that in its pledge to leave no one behind, the 2030 Agenda represents a commitment to reducing inequality through social, economic, and political inclusion for all people, including persons with disabilities. Yet, he says, many persons with autism still live in isolation, discriminated against and disconnected from their communities, in institutions or even in their own homes. The Secretary General stresses that we need to ensure that the rights, perspectives, and well-being of persons with disabilities, including those with autism, are an integral part of building forward better from the pandemic. And please note that the briefing by Ambassador Barbara Woodward, the permanent representative of the United Kingdom to the United Nations, and president of the Security Council for the month of April, that had been scheduled for today at 1 p.m., will instead take place on Monday, the 4th of April, at 1 p.m. And we have 2 pieces of good news to end this week. First, I'd like to thank our friends in San Marino for their full payment to this year's regular budget. Their check takes us to 81 fully paid up member states. And finally, would anyone like a coffee? This is not an April Fool's joke. We are pleased to inform you that the North Delegates Lounge and Terrace will reopen on Monday, the 4th of April, and will be open each weekday from 9:30 a.m. to 5 p.m. The lounge will offer a variety of beverages, pastries, salads, sandwiches, and treats, and I'm told that they may even serve alcohol occasionally. Access to the terrace from the lounge will be possible when weather permits. The Vienna Cafe, Lobby Cafe, and Riverview Cafe will continue to operate at their usual hours. And now, I will take your questions. Yes, Betul.
Hi, Farhan. Just to clarify, the truce in Yemen comes into effect at 7 p.m. local time. Is that correct?
7 p.m. local time, yes,
right.
that is the case. Is that it? Oh, you have a question, right? Please, go right ahead.
Thank you. Sorry. Just a little bit more about that. Can you tell us a little bit about exactly kind of when this agreement was reached and Mr. Grunberg's role in facilitating it?
Well, as you know, Mr. Grunberg has been traveling in recent days, including to Riyadh in Saudi Arabia and Muscat in Oman, to meet with the various parties. He made this announcement just now, a few minutes ago, in Amman, Jordan, and we made it more or less simultaneously from here. He'll have more details to provide as that becomes more clear. But we also expect, hopefully later this afternoon, to have a statement from the Secretary General's side about this agreement. But certainly this is the result of fairly painstaking work that a number of diplomats, including Mr. Grunberg, have been making with the various parties. Yes, Celia first, and then back to Betul.
Farhan, does the mission in DRC can work in North Kivu, where you have a lot of course, attacks and things like that? Are they there, or they cannot go there? And why don't we name Rwanda as part of, the people stealing the resources and killing people?
On your second question, we are investigating what happened to cause the helicopter to go down a few days ago, and that investigation is ongoing. Whenever we have more information, we'll try to disclose that. But at this stage, we're just going through the process of investigating how this all took place. The mission is active in throughout the DRC, including in North Kivu. It has, of course, problems in dealing with the fighting, and we certainly want to make sure that all of the armed factions, including M23, halt their activities. But it is continuing its work, and will continue to provide updates on what MONUSCO, the UN mission, is doing.
How many people from the UN mission are in North Kivu?
I'll try to get you what that number is, but our activities have been going on regularly and have not been hindered or impaired by this latest tragic incident. Yes, but
thank you.
Another question on Ukraine, Farhan. There are reports of sexual violence in Ukraine by the Russian troops. Does the UN have any knowledge of that? And what would be your reaction? Thank you.
Well, on that, you'll have seen that our human rights colleagues have been giving periodic updates, expressing their concerns about the situation there. I believe they've also, beyond providing tallies of the deaths, they have found evidence of other forms of human rights abuses, including of rapes, and they'll continue to tabulate that information and make it available to the Human Rights Council. And if that is it, yes, Kristen.
Thanks, Farhan. The Russian deputy ambassador this morning made some accusations saying that they had new evidence of threats or plots to possibly attack tankers, railway tankers with 800 tons of chlorine in I believe he said the Chuchuv region of Ukraine. I'm just wondering if the UN has heard about this. Has Russia shared any of this correspondence yet? And is there any reason to believe or any concern about attacks in Ukraine that you know of? Thanks.
We have no information about this. Of course, we would implore all parties to avoid any actions that can escalate the situation. But we do not have any information from this. Of course, we're open to receiving information from the parties. Yes, Alan.
Thank you, Stefan. During one of the last Security Council meetings on Ukraine, Ambassador Nebenzia mentioned that the Secretariat confirmed the cases of using by Ukrainian forces or nationalists, he said, of the UN vehicles. Can you please elaborate how many vehicles and in what cities were used by the Ukrainian forces and in which way? Thank you.
No. What happened, we are able to disable vehicles. As far as I'm aware, none of our vehicles is being misused. We did see some signs that one vehicle was taken from had moved from its area, and so that vehicle was disabled. So right now, there's no indication of any misuse of UN vehicles at this point.
Just to follow up, can you please explain what's the meaning of the word disabled?
It means we can render it immobile.
Well, was it made after they were seized by the Ukrainian forces or before?
There's no confirmation that it was seized by any forces. We had indications that it moved, and therefore it was disabled.
Thank you.
Okay, Philippe?
Thank you, Farhan. On Yemen, who are the parties?
In this case, we're talking on the one hand about the government of Yemen and its allies in the coalition, and on the other hand, the Houthis, who are also known as Ansar Allah. Have a good weekend, everyone. Paulina, come on up.
Yevheniya Kravchuk, Anastasia Radina, Ivanna Klympush-Tsintsadze. Okay. Well, maybe you can just introduce yourself when you start making your remarks. So we'll start with you. Go ahead.
Hello to everyone. My name is Lesia Zaburanna, and I am a member of Ukrainian Parliament. We are here together, our delegation of 5 members of Ukrainian Parliament. We are cross-party delegation, and first of all, we would like to say thank you very much for your time, for your support, and for your attention to our country. We highly appreciate the support, attention, and concern of all Canadian people, Canadian government, and now we are here to discuss our main issues, to discuss current situation in Ukraine, and to look for more support in such difficult times for our country. You know that now we have a war in our country, and we would like to highlight that it's not a war between Ukraine and Russia. It's a war between evil and democratic world. We are fighting for our people, for our land, for our nation, and we are fighting for democratic values, first of all. So we are looking for the support of all democratic countries in this struggle. We know and we highly appreciate Canadian support during all the period of our independence, during the last 30 years. Frankly speaking, Canada is one of the best friends of our country. We highly appreciate concern, attention, and support now from all Canadian people. But we ask you for more support and attention for our country. We need more support in 3 main spheres. First of all, it's military assistance. Now you know that we have really terrible situation in a lot of our regions. A lot of our cities were occupied, and we need military aid, more weapons, and we need it now, not tomorrow, but just now. The second one, what we would like to discuss is sanctions. You know that Canada is also very brave in this question, and really we highly appreciate that you have implemented a lot of sanctions, but we need more sanctions, more strong sanctions, and increase the number of sanctions. And the next one, we are looking also for financial assistance. Now, because of the war, we have financial losses about $550 million. A lot of our cities, villages were absolutely destroyed. And now the state budget deficit about $7 million per month. So we are looking not only for support of International Monetary Fund, but it's very important, but we are looking for direct financing to our state budget. And once more time, thank you very much for everything what are you doing for us, but now we really look for more support and more help. Thank you.
Greetings to everyone. My name is Anastasia Radina. As we discuss support for Ukraine, the question we are getting most is how do we assess current negotiations with Russia and whether we think that these negotiations are actually bringing us to peace. Now, we understand that people might be tired of war and hoping that negotiations will bring peace. Unfortunately, we know for sure that Russia cannot be trusted. These are not real negotiations yet. The only way to get real negotiations with Russia is to achieve military superiority on the ground. We were forced to make compromises with Russia for many, many, many years. In 2014, when Russia bited off Crimea and imposed puppet regimes on Donetsk in Donetsk and Lugansk regions, we were also told not to escalate and to make compromises. But this did not bring peace to Ukraine. We learned with our blood and tears that compromises with Russia only lead to Russia mobilizing more money, mobilizing more military strength, and hitting us even harder and inflicting more pain and more undescribable sufferings to our people. So now our approach is that Ukraine has to win the war, has to kick Russian soldiers out of our land, and this is our only option to receive peace. In order to do that, what Ukraine needs is lethal weaponry, heavy weaponry. And this is what we are asking for from the democratic world. Ukraine needs military assistance. Ukraine needs heavy weaponry in order not just to stop Russian troops from advancing, but in order to be able to kick them out and help people in besieged cities like Mariupol, Melitopol, and other cities. We are kindly asking Canadian government to follow up on the list of military needs that has been provided by our Ministry of Defense. I may say that this list includes heavy weaponry like tanks, includes anti-air systems, but not only, the list is quite comprehensive, and we do hope that Canadian government will stand with Ukraine, not just in words, but also in action. And when we say action, what we mean is actions are urgent. We cannot allow ourselves to live in pre-world bureaucratic decision-making. Provision of lethal weaponry to Ukraine is a matter of days. What we hope to see and hear is very precise timeline, and we cannot emphasize enough that providing lethal weaponry in any kind of a delay would also mean a failure, unfortunately. We are now hoping that all the democratic world will stand together with Ukraine in a very timely and urgent manner in action to prove that things like international order, that things like rule of law, that things like international humanitarian law exist and will be protected in action. Thank you so much.
Thank you. My name is Ivanna Klympush-Tsintsadze. I'm also Ukrainian MP, chair of the Committee of Ukraine's integration into the EU. Thank you very much for letting the voice of the Ukrainian people being heard loud and clear. And that's with your help. We are reaching out to all the societies across the world. We are grateful for that opportunity and this attention to the most brutal, barbaric war that is being carried out by Russian Federation on our territory since World War II has to be sustained. We are under fire. Ukraine is on fire, and Russia is trying to erase us from the map of the world by bombarding, shelling, pounding on our cities. Russia is killing our citizens indiscriminately. Russia is driving people from their homes. So already millions are displaced and refugees. But on the top of all of this, Russia doesn't want to stop. Whatever Russian narratives are on those negotiations or so-called peace talks, we have to understand Russia will not stop if it's not stopped. And this is possible to do. Ukrainians do have courage, Ukrainians do have the resolve, do have capable armed forces, but without backing of the free world, we cannot stop Russia barehandedly. So on the top of weapons that we urgently need, and need them for today, for yesterday actually, we also need pressure on Russian Federation to be further extended. And we appreciate Canadian stance on the sanctions. We appreciate the readiness and leadership of Canada to roll out additional sanctions on Russian Federation, but we need to get others on board. The thing is that embargo on oil and gas has to be introduced comprehensively. And that means that we have to stop European Union from buying Russian fossil fuels, because as of 24th of February, more than 23 billion euros have been paid to Russian Federation, thus sponsoring Russian terrorist activity against Ukraine. We are also calling on all banking system of the Russian Federation to be under sanctions. We are calling on isolating Russia internationally in IFIs, in cultural, in sport organizations. We are calling on not only Russian vessels being prohibited from your ports, but also Canadian vessels not to go into Russian ports. So much more can be done in coordination and in cooperation with others, and Canada has a real serious role to play. So we either can win together or will fail together. So for the sake of democracy, for the sake of values, for the sake of the survival of the Ukrainian nation and nation state and the global order, we have to be together and have to win this battle together. And we believe that offense is the best defense right now for us.
My name is Yevheniya Kravchuk. I'm a member of Ukrainian Parliament and Deputy Chair of Committee on Humanitarian Information and Policy. I'm a journalist myself, and I thank you for doing this job, because the more words you spread to all of the world, the more chances we will have to win, because the focus on Ukraine has to be kept, because we're still in war. And the very good reminder of this war was yesterday's in Prime Minister Trudeau's office, because on my phone the air siren went on. And that meant that in the neighborhood where my 8-year-old daughter resides, there was an attempt of air attack, and my daughter had to go to basement instead of go to school. We have this, a lot of stories to tell. My husband is near Kiev. He's a police officer. He's fighting as well. And he told me about so-called withdrawal. We do not believe in any withdrawals. We do not believe Putin. We believe in Ukrainian army. These days, Ukrainian army has been liberating numerous villages in Kyiv region and as well in the south, in Kherson region. But I want to get this message really straight. We cannot do this with rifles. We have to have heavy weaponry to kick Russians from our territory. Because if we talk about the end of this war, we mean winning in this war. Because other than that, Putin will not stop. He will think that he can go to other countries and humiliate the Western world. So all the Western world has to be firm and has to be fast in giving us support if we all want to keep peace, democracy, the democratic values, the rule of law, the freedom of speech, and whatever values we do believe in together. I would like to give you some highlights on the humanitarian situation in Ukraine. Already around a quarter of Ukrainian population was displaced. Either it's 9 million people who are internally displaced people. They left their regions because these regions are bombed. Or over 4 million, around 4 million people of refugees who left the country, mainly women and kids. we have to say that the situation in such cities as Mariupol is devastating. It's becoming a mass graveyard, and we need to deblock Mariupol as fast as possible. Russians do not let the humanitarian help, aid with food, with water to enter the city. And still in Mariupol stays over 100,000 of people blocked there in basements. All the buildings are ruined, no water, no electricity, and we urgently need weapons to deblock Mariupol as well. Also, we fixated around 4,000 of cases of war crimes. There hasn't been a war crime that Russian army hasn't committed in Ukraine. I gave to honorable members of House of Commons a file about killings of children. Already we have from our Office of Attorney General information about 148 deaths, killings of children. But the number will go up in times because we do not even know what's going on in Mariupol, how many children and how many people, civilians, had died. But it looks like it's more than 5,000 already just in Mariupol. But when we get there, the world, I think, will be shocked with the results. Also, we have 40,000 of Ukrainians that were forcibly taken to Russian Federation, to Russian territory, and partly to Belarus. That's kidnapping. That's kidnapping. And we do want to underline that what International Red Cross plans are to establish in Rostov an office. It's actually inviting Russians to kidnap our people and to bring them to Russia, which is unacceptable, and we can't have this. And to end this, I want to say that we have to be ready for a long run. We have to be ready that civilized world has to stand with Ukraine as long as it needs for us to win, but the time is crucial for us. To be slow means to fail. So we ask for this support to be in time, to be fast, and we will win. We are capable of winning. Thank you so much.
Dear friends, my name is Maria Ionova. I'm a member of the Parliament Foreign Affairs Committee, and I really also would like to thank all of you for all Canadian nation people, also government, senators, parliaments who are supporting us today, also parliamentarians. And we need your synergy. We need your synergy, to change and to use this moment to win. To win aggressor, to punish terror, to punish war criminal. And as my colleague was saying, really, all these crimes are horrible. We didn't expect it, and it's the worst situation after World War II. And Russians, they are acting worse than Nazi, because they are killing our children, newborn children, they're raping our women, they're destroying and damaging our hospitals, mental hospitals, our institution, educational centers, critical infrastructure. They're kidnapping, they're taking as a hostages our elected democratically local representatives, journalists, priests, civil society activists, paramedic. So they are stolen our citizens and by force, really deportation to Russia Federation. So that is why Putin has to be punished, and we also appreciate and thank Canada to join international tribunal. We have to put Putin to be punished and by criminal investigation. Also, regarding humanitarian situation, we really know Canada leadership in humanitarian issues, and unfortunately, international humanitarian organizations are not on the ground, and it's already 37 days of our war, and we need you to help us to mobilize humanitarian agencies. And that is why here we need your humanitarian leadership. I'd like to say that nuclear weapon, it's also a challenge for the whole world, not only for Ukraine. As you know, he is blackmailing and he is controlling and attacking our nuclear power plants. And that is why we are asking also here to international society, and especially Canada as a leader in G7, to have a strategy how to answer on these challenges. We don't want next Aleppo. We don't want. We remember that Russia poisoning people, interfering elections. We remember what they are doing in Belarus, in Kazakhstan, in Syria. So they are people of war. We are people of peace, and that is why we really share democratic values, and only all together we can defend them. Because yes, or we win all together, or we fail altogether. And that is why, coming back to what my colleagues mentioned, freedom has to be armed. And we are asking you and asking Canadian government, Canadian people, nation, weapon, sanctions, and financial support. Together we win, and we are asking you to be with us. Thank you.
Thank you. We will now take questions. We have about 30 minutes. We have also one person on the line. So we will start with Abigail Biman.
Hi, Abigail Beeman, Global News. Thank you for your time and thanks for taking our questions. For whoever wants to answer, I'm wondering what the response was from the Prime Minister yesterday and whether you feel that what you're asking for, that Canada will deliver.
First of all, let me be very clear. We understand and feel the support of Canadian people. Canada was the first country to introduce oil embargo against Russia, and this was a game changer. And after that, other countries followed Canadian leadership. We are grateful for that. However, we urge Canadian people and Canadian government to act faster and to provide more support in terms of legal weaponry. Lethal weaponry. We are very much afraid that taking decisions and taking discussions and mobilizing support will take too much time. Now, not being able to act in a timely manner will mean failure, not just for Ukraine, but for all the democratic world. This would mean that democratic world is not able to send a message that democratic values will be protected. So what we are urging for is to provide support in a timely manner, to provide Ukraine with lethal weapons we're asking for in a timely manner. Time matters. Please follow that.
Prime Minister Trudeau, we were reassured that Canada is with Ukraine for whatever it takes for us to win. So we hope that this message will translate into more and more concrete actions with urgency that is required on the ground when the country is on fire.
Thank you for listening to Depictions Media Radio.